Okay, well, let's get started. And thank you all for coming, and thank everybody who is watching us on YouTube or Zoom. Thank you very much for joining us. One of the things we're going to do, we are going to recite the opening prayers from our 101 prayer book, and we'll do it one time in English. But then to give us a little bit more practice in doing the Tibetan, we're going to do it along with Kenshin Rinpoche and Kempo Sultram from the Tibetan Meditation Center, recordings that were made several years ago. So we'll be able to play those. You can hear them, and then you should be chanting, reciting along with them. So I think you'll find this a very good experience to do that. So where it's indicated, we'll do it once in English and then 3 times in the Tibetan with the monks. Where it's only once, we'll just do it once with the monks, once in English. And I hope you enjoy this. So we'll start with the opening prayer starting on page number 1, the altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. So now in the Tibetan.
Oi da la da wara je be da na bra je be ge tora ba da dam je be bra do ju bra je ba dam je zo je be Manang badanyam bezim jedam jedewa dande Tonga dande nyuru dola nameba Yanda brazo bejan jurim boje dobraja Dalai dang waraje beja no braje begin Taraba dang dam je gen be brato ju braje ba dam je zo je be Manang wadanyam bezim je dam je dewa dande Tonga da de nyuru do la na me ba yang da brazo be jan jure bo je do bra ja da la da wara je be da no bra je be je Tarapa dam je be bra do jo bra je ba dam je zo je be Manang ba danyam be sim je dam je de wa dan de Tonga dan de nyuru do la na me ba yang da brazo be jan jure boje do brai jai.
The action bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Just need. Action bodhicitta prayer with the lamas.
Deche to sama je je pa to lu nga ye song je wa la gu. Ma she pra to lu nga ye song je wa la gu. De de ne son de ni ma san ta san je pra to lu nga ye song je wa la gu.
The long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Ten jen sa wa dan ju pra che pe pan de la ma dam ba nam la ja so je wo. Ye tam jen gro je la so nam la ja so je wo. San je chun den de nam la ja so je wo. Tande chu nam la ja so je wo. Pa pe gen du nam la ja so je wo. Pa wo kan ro je jung so men so. Ye she ji jen dan den ba nam la ja so je wo. Ten jen za wa dan ju pra je pe pan de la ma dam ba nam la ja so je wo. Ye tam jen gru je la so nam la ja so je wo. San je chung den de nam la ja so je wo. Tam pe chu nam la ja so je wo. Pa pe gen du nam la ja so je wo. Pa wo kan ro je jung su men so. Ye she ji jen dan den ba nam la ja so je wo. Ten jen za wa dan ju pra che pe pan de la ma dam ba nam la ja so je wo. Ye tam jen gru je la so nam la ja so je wo. San je chum den de nam la ja so je wo. Tam pe chu nam la ja so je wo. Pa pe gen du nam la ja so je wo. Pa wo kan ro je jung su men so. Ye she ji jen dan den ba nam la ja so je wo.
Next prayer is taking the Bodhisattva vow. It's also called cultivating the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta. Once in English, 3 times with the monks. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path.
Chanjo nyembro jeje bara sanje namla jazo che chedan chanjo sembai sola deje jazo che Jedra Mungi Deji Chanju Dune Gebada Chanju Sembe Labala Dedarim Shenebadar Deshen Rola Gendando Chanju Sene Jeje Shin Deshen Dune Labala Remba Shindu Labraye Chanjo Nyembro Jeje Bang Sanje Namla Jazo Che Chetan Janju Sembaye Solan Deshen Jazo Che Chetara Mungi Deji Chanju Dune Gebada Chanju Sembe Labala Dedarim Shene Barada Deshen Rola Gendendo Chanju Sene Jeje Shin Deshen Dune Labala Remba Shindu Abraye Chanju Nyembro Jeje Bang Sanje Namla Jazo Chedan Janju Sembaye Solan Deshen Jazo Jedra Mungi Deshen Chanju Dune Gebada Chanju Sembe Labala Dedarim Shene Badar Deshen Rola Gendando Chanju Sene Jeje Shin Deshen Dune Labala Remba Shindu Labraye.
The Short Refuge Prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings.
Sanje Chedan Zoje Jonam La Janju Brado Dane Jaso Che Taje Jin Soje Beso Nam Je Drola Benje Sanje Ro Brasho Sanje chudan zoji chonam la Chanju brado dane jasoje Taje jin soji be sonam je Drola benjre sanje rubrasho Sanje chudan zoji chonam la Chanju brado dane jasoje Taje jin soji be sonam je Drola benjre sanje rubrasho.
The four immeasurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. In Tibet.
Manang bodanyam besen jintanje dewa dan dewe jodan dem brajuroje donge dan donge ge jodan dewa joje donge me be dewa dan me dewa joje Nyere chata nye dan dewe dan yom la ne ba juroje Manam ga dan yam besem je tam je dewa dan dewe jo dan dem ba juroje Donge da donge ge jo dan dewa joje Donge me be dewa dan me dewa joje Nere cha dan ni dan dewe dan yum la ne ba joje Manam ga danyam besem jen tam je dewa dan dewe jo dan dem bra joje Donga dan donga ge jo dan dewa joje Donga me be dewa dan me dewa joje Nyere cha da ni da dewe da nyum la ne ba joje.
Now the next page is the 100-syllable purification mantra of Vajrasattva. We'll recite this once in English and 3 times in the Sanskrit along with the monks. Om Vajrasattva Samaya, help to protect my vow to purify myself. May you remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me. Be loving towards me. Grant me the attainments to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the bliss of the 4 joys, O Blessed One, who embodies the essence within me. Do not abandon me. Grant me the realization of the indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus I signify my unity with non-duality. Ah.
Om Bhadra Sattva Samaya Manopalaya Bhadra Sattva Deno Bhati Chande Do Membhava Sudokaya Membhava Subhakaya Membhava Anurado me bhava sava siddhi me praya sarva karma sutta me chidam shriya guru ha 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 ho bhagava sarva dada gata bhadrama me bhaja bhaja bhava ma samaya sattva Om Bhadra Sattva Samaya Mano Balaya Bhadra Sattva Teno Bhai Tishya Deto Membhava Suto Kayo Membhava Subho Kayo Membhava Anorato Membhava Sava Siddhi Membraya Sava Karma Sutta Me Siddham Shriya Guru ha 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 ho bhagava sarva tata gata bhadrama me bhaja bhaja bhava ma samaya sattva om bhadra sattva samaya mano balaya bhadra sattva teno bhai deta deto me bhava Sudho kayo me bhava subho kayo me bhava Anurado me bhava sava siddhi me praya sarva karma sutta me chedam shriya guru ha 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 ho bhagava sarva dada gata bhadrama me bhaja bhaja bhava ma samaya sattva Om Bhadra Sattva Samaya Mano Balaya Bhadra Sattva Dhanamba Dhidandhidra Membhava Sudha Jaya Membhava Subhakaya Membhava Ananda Membhava Savasita Membraya Sarva Karma Sudha Me Siddhana Shriya Guru Ha 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 Bhagavana Savatata Gata Bhadra Membhava Bhadra Bhava Samaya Sattva Om Bhadra Sattva Samaya Mano Balaya Bhadra Sattva Dhanamba Dhidandhidra Membhava Sudha Jaya Membhava Subhakaya Membhava Ananda Membhava Sarvasita Membraya Sarva Karma Sutta Me Siddham Shriya Guru Ha 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 Ho Bhagavana Savatata Sama Me Mundam Bharja Bhava Ma Samaya Sattva Om Bhadra Sattva Samaya Manobalaya Bhadra Sattva Dhanamba Dhidandhidra Membhava Sudha Jaya Membhava Subhakaya Membhava Anurada Membhava Sarvasita Membraya Sarva Karma Sutta Me Siddham Shriya Guru Ha 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 Ho Bhagavana Savatata Gata Bharja Me Mundam Bharja Ma Samaya Sattva Bhadra Sattva Samaya Manobalaya Bhadra Sattva Dhanamba Dhidandhidra Membhava Sudhakaya Membhava Subhakaya Membhava Anurada Membhava Sarvasita Membraya Sarva Karma Sutta Me Siddham Shriya Guru Ha 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 Bhagavana Sarvatata Gata Bharja Me Mundam Bharja Ma Samaya Sattva Bhadra.
Okay, so now we go to page 12 in the 101 book. The Sagari Mati requested sutra. We'll recite that together one time in English. Likewise, be extinguished. Extinguished all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are within me, be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me, completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food and drink peacefully, enjoy it, and be satisfied, so that all obstacles may be destroyed. Be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the Maras be purified. As a result, may all the Maras be defeated. Very good. Thank you all very much for that. How did you enjoy that along with the lamas?
Lance, that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If anybody wants that, you can download it, and if you can play it in your car. If you want a CD, I'll burn a CD for you. If you want to burn to a thumb drive, I can do that for you, or you can do it yourself. But to play it in your car while you're driving, instead of listening to, something that is very mundane, listen to these prayers and get with the rhythm, to be able to memorize these is very, very, very helpful. I think most of the people that I know who came up at the same time that I did learning these prayers, this is what they've done, is they would listen to these in the car. So if I can help in any way to make that happen, let me know. I'll be glad to do it. These
Where
prayers,
can you download them from?
they are on our website. They're on buddhapracticestudy.org under the, is it org or is it com? I always forget.
.com. You
.com.
asked me for .com and now you're always saying .org.
Well, what can you say? Anyway, it's .com, and you can it's in the audio tab. Just bring it down. You can download it, hear it from there.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. Okay. So does anybody have any questions or comments? We've been talking about the 101. We've been talking about the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And the past couple of weeks, we talked about part one, which was the primary cause, our Buddha nature. And then part two was the working basis, the precious human life. And then part three was the contributory cause for our primal cause. To be able to recognize our primal cause is the spiritual master. So that's what we've been talking about. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
Lance, this is not linear to what you're just asking. I'm going to write a note for the opening prayers you just did. Are there like key opening prayers you do? Like you're like, always do this one? Because like sometimes we abbreviate which ones are you like, always do this one?
We do in the 101 book.
Yeah.
We're going from page 1 all the way through to page 9.
Okay.
Is what's included in these prayers. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
And they go in order. There is one change I'm going to ask Bernie to make because there was one needed to be modified a little bit, and I edited it, and that's what we did tonight. But on the website right now, that needs to be uploaded to the website and the old one taken down. So I will send that to Bernie tonight, and hopefully he'll be able to do it the next day.
Tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
So question though, like, so like if I'm meditating just procedurally, it would be an enhancement for me to read all those and then go into my meditation and then close it with the Dharma prayer.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. This is the right thing. This is the structure of developing a practice.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So now to further give structure awareness to what we've been doing in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, what we did with chapter 2 that we did a couple of weeks ago, Precious Human Life, is from the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. So we're going to recite that next. So the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma was part 2 in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. Then part 3 is impermanence, the part of impermanence of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. So, and then next after that, we'll be talking about karma, cause, and result. And then we'll also, following that, be talking about the suffering of samsara. So what we're going over here are the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. And for those of you who are doing this basically for the first time with us, Buddhism 101, this is the way we do this. These are the fundamental teachings. So we're trying to point them out to you, give you some background as to what they mean and so on. But we repeat these over and over again, these explanations. And finally, you should be taking them up and practicing these and reciting these yourself as you do your practices. So you would do your opening prayers, Zara, as you were just asking. Then you would recite the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. And then you would go to the next part of your practice. So this is the order of being able to remind yourself of why it is that you're doing this, what it is, why you're doing it, and then how you're doing it through the structure of this. Okay, so now if you have your copy of the Four Thoughts That Turn to Mind to the Dharma, this here. If you don't, I'm going to screen share it. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so let me get rid of this thing here. Okay, so now we're going to recite this together with no explanation. But if you have questions or comments, please save it for the end, because what I'm trying to help you to do is to see the flow of this. So we'll recite this from beginning to end. The four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, the preliminary foundation awakenings. Precious human life, the freedoms and advantages so extremely difficult to obtain, accomplish the purpose of human life. If one does not achieve benefit from this now, how could this opportunity come again? Ho, this kind of leisure and endowment is supremely difficult to obtain. When one obtains a body, which is easily lost, do not waste it meaninglessly, but rather use it to attain ultimate liberation, joyous result. Next is impermanence. Ka, no matter what has been done, nothing benefits at the time of death. Worldly activities, yes, they are lies. Ka, the 8 worldly dharmas are like a painted rainbow. Think you can put your trust in them? In the certainty of death, and knowing that nothing remains long, quickly accomplish liberation. Impermanence makes departure certain, like the shadow of the setting sun. Abandoning laziness and indifference, blaze like fire in fierce diligence. This life is impermanent, like clouds in the autumn sky. Birth and death migrators are the same as actors in a play or a dance. Now to page 3. The life of beings is like lightning in the sky. Like water falling from a steep mountain cliff, it departs quickly, quickly. The nature of all phenomena is impermanence. Death is a certainty to all who are born. Death can descend any time like a drop of morning dew on a blade of grass. Quick, it is time to make effort for the essence of the Dharma. Now to page 4. Karma, cause and result. Even if one were a king, at the time of death, one's possessions, enjoyments, friends, and retinue will not follow. But wherever that sentient being goes, his karma follows after him like a shadow. The fruit of one's positive karma is happiness. Suffering is the fruit of negative karma. The inexorable karmic causation is the mode of abiding in all dharmas. Henceforth, practice the Dharma by distinguishing between what should be practiced and what should be given up. And next is page 7. Page 5, excuse me. Page 5, the suffering of samsara. Consider the suffering of beings in the 6 realms of samsara. Doing so, great fear and dread arise in the heart. In the 3 lower realms, and even in the 3 higher ones, there is not an instant of absolute happiness. I will avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence and practice the excellent path of peace to enlightenment. So that concludes the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that? Okay, so within the booklet, this little Pecha text, it's called a Pecha, P-E-C-H-A, which is a Tibetan book. It doesn't have any binding to it, but the pages flip over as if there is a binding. It's a traditional book. So within this booklet, is explanations for some of the prayers that we just recited. So if you get in the habit of using this text in your everyday practices, it'll start coming together. You'll start seeing how things are working together with the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma: precious human life, impermanence, karma, cause and result, and the suffering of samsara. Okay. So if there's no questions then we'll continue on. So now I'm turning to the outline, and I'm on page 7 of the book that I have. It says part 4, the method. So this is the Spiritual Master's introduction, chapter 4, the antidote to attachment to this life, impermanence. This is the antidote to attachment to this life. How do we detach from this life? How do we overcome our attachments to this life? Well, here it's going to help us to recognize what the attachments are and how it is that we can release ourselves from those attachments. It doesn't mean that we don't still have the awareness. It doesn't mean that we're still human beings and these things are still happening. But the issue is that we're not attached to them, or we don't have aversions to them. So we're doing it through the awareness of impermanence. Impermanence. We, as human beings, we look at all this phenomenal nature all around us, and we look at it as being permanent. We think this table is going to be permanent. We think this screen that we're looking at right now is permanent. We think the clothes that you're wearing are permanent. We think our body is permanent. Now, some of this may be wishful thinking, but nevertheless, we do tend to think that, when we're 20 years old, I'm never going to die. I don't have to worry about that. But then as we get older and sickness comes, injuries come, and changes come within our lives and so on, and we see other people that are going through their changes, we realize that impermanence is part of this phenomenal nature. So this is what we're going to explore. Okay, so of course this is chapter 4 of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So if you have that book and you want to read the whole chapter, I certainly encourage you to do that. So what are the 4 obstacles to the attainment of Buddhahood? What are the 4 obstacles to the attainment of Buddhahood? What is it that is standing in our way as ordinary human beings that blocks us, that obscures us, that prevents us from attaining our true nature, of realizing our true nature? Our true nature is already there, but we got these blockages, we got these coverings that we don't recognize. We just see it as everyday things. We don't see that it's blocking up our true nature, our Buddha nature, our precious human life. So the 4 obstacles to the attainment of Buddhahood are listed here. It says, number 1 is being attached to this life's activities. So that's so easy. We take it for granted that we're so locked up with our jobs. We're so locked up with our families. We're so locked up with our home and our possessions, our identity, our physical identity, and so on. The things that we do in particular, that we say, oh, this is so great. This is what life is. And this prevents us from seeing our life with a different view. That the view is that we are here to perfect ourselves as being awakened, as being able to see all the changes, all the things that are happening around us, and taking responsibility for all the happiness and all the suffering that comes with all of that. So we may be doing these things, our jobs, our families, and so on, but what degree of suffering do we have from those things? Many times we're saying, oh my God, so-and-so's calling me, I got to deal with this problem. But then another day comes by and you say, oh, well, I took care of that problem. I really feel good. Everything is really nice. So we go through these changes all the time, but we're not recognizing them as blinding us, as preventing us from recognizing our true nature, which is peace. That even though we're involved with all these different things, that there is a peace, that we abide in the peace of mind, the peace of heart, that we remain this happiness, for lack of better words. So the second thing of obstacles is that we're attached to the pleasures of samsara. So this is another way of saying the ocean of suffering, that we're attached to these things, where we can do these things and we enjoy these things. We're attached to the pleasures of them. We take pleasures in our relationships. We take pleasures in our family and so on. We take pleasures in our car and in our house and our vacations. All the things that we do, we take pleasure in that. But those are all things that can turn into a lot of confusion for us and a lot of unhappiness. We can say, oh, I've been waiting all year to go take my vacation. I've got a week that I don't have to think about anything. We're going to the beach and it's going to be great. And you get there on Saturday, and Saturday night it starts raining, and it doesn't stop raining until you leave on Friday. And you say, oh my God, I've saved all this money. I've rented this house. We got all our clothes. We couldn't go on the beach for one day because it was pouring down raining the whole time. So that's just an example of how, we want to have pleasure. We take pleasure in samsara. We want to have that, but then things can turn very quickly. And now all of a sudden that pleasure becomes suffering, becomes unhappiness. So we can look at it in so many different ways. We can look at it in our bank accounts. We can look at it in our relationships. We can look at it in our possessions, how we take pleasure in having these things, working for these things, developing these things, but then they lead to some form of suffering or another. So this requires a contemplation. Just saying this, my saying this is just to remind you. And if you are going through this process during your meditation time, during the time that we call meditation, and you're thinking about these in this successive order, these thoughts will come up to you and you'll say, oh yeah, now I can see what this means. I can contemplate what this means. I can contemplate that this has happened to me, and so on. So the next thing is the third thing, the obstacles, is the attachment to peace. That we attach ourselves to peace, that we want this peace. And I want this peace at all costs. And I will do everything to be able to attain this peace. So I'll start doing practice. I'll start reading these books. I'll start doing these chanting and so on. And then slowly, we find ourselves becoming blocked up with our attachment to this peace. Oh, I want this. Oh, I got to do this. Oh, I've been doing it for an hour. I'm going to do it for another hour. But then that other hour becomes a little bit more laborious for us, becomes a little bit more difficult for us. And maybe it takes away from our doing something else that might be something important that we need to do. So the point here is that we need to be able to balance this. We need to be able to see that when we start doing the peaceful things that are bringing us peace, that we can get anxious about it. We can get overwrought about it. And then we have to put it aside. We have to take a break. We have to say, oh, this is I'm getting carried away with this. I'm losing the peace that I was seeking the whole time. So this is the attachment to the peace. So we need to be able to, again, have the overview, to have the objectivity, the circumspection, the to be able to recognize what it is that we're doing all the time and be able to see where our balance is, where our happiness balance is, and so on. We want to be happy, we want to be peaceful, but if something that we're doing is we think is making us peaceful, is making us agitated, we need to step back from that for a time. And we pick it back up in the right combination of time and effort. So then the fourth thing of the 4 obstacles to attain Buddhahood is not understanding the method by which this enlightenment is to be achieved. So that's what I was just saying. Having the balance, having the structure, having a system that we develop for ourselves that keeps us in that sense of balance without getting too agitated, without getting too lazy, but finding that there's a balance and not forsaking any part of this. It's real easy for us to suppress the spirituality aspect. Why? Because it's so subtle. And we say to ourselves, oh, I can do that anytime, but I got to get to my job. I got to do that. Oh, I got to get the car fixed. I got to do that. Oh, I got to go out with my family. I got to do that. These are things that I feel I got to do, everyday things that I've got to do, and I will sacrifice my subtle spirituality in order to be able to do those other things, those mundane things. But if we recognize that those subtle spiritual things are a vital part of our development as being a complete human being, and we can't let ourselves suppress those things. We have to make time for those things and respect that time and that effort to be able to do that. And sometimes we have to work smarter. We have to say, oh, I'm already working 60 hours a week. Maybe I can work 40 hours a week. Maybe I can work 50 hours a week and actually do it better, do a better job than all the time that I waste, those extra hours I waste during those 60 hours that I'm working. And plus during that time, I'm making myself crazy. I'm making myself so agitated. Or maybe it's with my family. I got to be with my family. You know, we every Friday night, we always have a get together. We always have dinner together. And maybe we need to say it's every other Friday night or something like that, because that Friday night, maybe there's a particular practice I want to do, or there's a teaching I want to attend or something. So we have to find these balances between the mundane things and the spiritual things that we want to do. So these are the four obstacles that block our attainment of Buddhahood, of our peace of mind. So this takes some contemplation. We have to think about what this is. We have to recognize the different aspects of what I was just talking about. So this is part of our practice. Does that make sense? Anybody have any question about that or thoughts about that? Okay. These are the things that we tend to take for granted. You know, we don't realize what's happening. And again, I've said we have to take responsibility for our suffering. We have to take responsibility for our happiness, and we have to find how these things, you know, come together and find the balance of these things. All this is necessary at one level or another, and is being able to use the wisdom of discriminating awareness that we've been talking about to be able to judge how we do all this. So then this next part of the discussion is, how can these four obstacles be dispelled? So it says the spiritual master's instruction on that we meditate on impermanence. What is impermanence? We meditate on the faults of samsara, the cause and result, karma, cause and result. We meditate on loving kindness and compassion. and we examine the various elements of the cultivation of bodhicitta, the various elements of the cultivation of bodhicitta. So bodhicitta we know is loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So being able to bring these things together, and the key word here is meditation, that we have to give ourselves the opportunity to think about these things. Meditation is a process. It starts by doing the opening prayers, and after that we go to the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, which is what we're explaining now. Then we go to shamatha, calm abiding meditation. We try and relax. We try and just let the thoughts just rest. And as the thoughts come, we just let them go and not attach to them. Just let them go. And then we just rest, and another thought comes, and we just let it go. And so on, to develop the technique of being able to do that, to become adept at being a shamatha meditator, a calm abiding meditator. And then we develop vipassana meditation, which is insight meditation, which is taking the teachings, the wisdom teachings, and being able to take them apart and put them back together again. We're taking them apart, finding out all the elements, and then as we put them back together again, we're seeing how they impact our lives. We're seeing how our lives impacts those parts. We're seeing that there's a dynamic relationship. And so we're examining that and looking at the things that aren't necessary and saying, oh, I don't need to do that anymore. I used to really think I needed that, and it just made me anxious. I don't need to do that anymore. Or this thing over here always gave me a happiness and a satisfaction, and I need to do more of this. So being able to ascertain all that is the insight meditation. I mean, that's a very simplification of that process, but it's basically what we do. And that wisdom of how to do that, of what that is all within ourselves. So as we develop the calm abiding meditation, in between those everyday thoughts, these vipassana thoughts, these insight thoughts come up, and we begin to recognize ourselves as the Buddha. We begin to recognize ourselves as the Bodhisattva. We begin to recognize ourselves as the Dakini, as the Dharma protectors. We begin to see all these Dharma teachings coming alive within us in our lifetime. So this wisdom comes up, and then we're able to say, oh, I can see how these things, and we're connecting the dots, so to speak. We're seeing how all this works, and we realize that whether we realized it or not, that we were always a spiritual person. We were always had a spiritual body. We always had a physical body. We always had an intellectual body, but we always had a spiritual body as well. And now through this insight, we're seeing how it works together and so on. So this is part of that process. As we are doing that, we go through these periods of contemplation. Through all this that I just said, we're going through periods of contemplation, but then we go through these periods of the quietude, and then the meditation arises out of that all by itself. It's like the Vipassana meditation. It just arises by itself. It's like the cream that arises out of freshly squeezed milk. It comes from the cow, and just naturally the cream will come up. So this is like that Buddha nature. This is the meditation, and we don't recognize it until after we kind of wake up, or we realize that we were having this quietude, that we were having this peaceful experience within ourselves of this meditation. And we say, oh, there it was. It was there the whole time. And it's just another way of looking at everything. We're looking at everything with all this experience behind us, with all this anticipation that's driving us to do these things. And everything that we're doing is being ground up in the mill of the way in which we view all this. The meditation is being able to view everything from a totally different point of view, a different vantage point. And we see everything in a clear way that here we're just locked up in the machinations of everything that we do. So we have to give ourselves the opportunity to do that. So again, it comes from the structure, the process of the meditation. Now, everybody says, oh, I got my meditation. This is the way I do it. And that's fine, but I got to ask you one question. How's it working for you? Is it getting you to be where you want to be? Is it answering any of these questions? Is it giving you the clarity and the peace of mind that you're looking for? If the answer is yes, that's marvelous, wonderful. But if it's not, then maybe you need to have more structure. You need to listen to what we're saying and apply these structures to be able to get to that point that you're actually looking for. And this is the system. This is what the Buddha taught. And it's not just the Buddha system, but there's other systems. There's a Christian system, there's a Hebrew system, there's a Hindu system, there's a Taoist system, there's many different systems, to get you that point. But if we're insisting, oh, I don't need any of that, I got that all handled myself, I figured that all out, ask yourself the question, how's it working for you? Okay. Any comments or questions right now? Okay. So then we continue on, talking about the meditation on impermanence. How do we meditate on impermanence? We already talked about, meditating on this precious human life. We've talked about that. We've covered that. Now we're talking about how do I meditate on impermanence? So there's two impermanence that we have to consider. There's the impermanence of the outer world, the phenomenal world, that which is all around us, that which we take for granted, that which we usually think is permanent. We think, oh, the cosmos, this is permanent. This has always been here. It's always going to be here. All the planets and all this and everything. But we're not seeing the times when those galaxies come and collide with each other. And the asteroids collide with the planets, and the planets collide with each other. And now new things are created out of that. Those planets appear to be permanent. Those galaxies appear to be permanent. But now we realize that they're impermanent, and now they become something else. Isn't that change? And now we're recognizing that that's what happens in nature, out in the cosmos and so on. But we can see that here on the planet. We can see that here in our own lives and everything. That which we think is going to be permanent, it's going to last forever. I can take this book and say, well, this book, if I take proper care of it, it's going to last forever. But if I get a little lazy and I take it outside and read one day, and I forget about it, and I put it underneath my chair, and I go inside the house, and here comes a rainstorm and destroys the book. That which I thought was permanent, now in the right conditions, or in the difficult conditions, and certain conditions, it gets destroyed. It becomes something else. It becomes just a lump of paper, pulp. So our life is going through that. Phenomenal nature is going through that process all the time. So to be able to examine that, to examine the impermanence of the outer world is very important. So this is part of the process. We have to go through a logical process of looking at this during our meditation time, what we call meditation time, where we're contemplating this. So we're meditation on the gross impermanence of the outer world. It says right here in the book, it says fire. Fire leaves ashes as residue until the item is completely destroyed. Water. There's no sediment that absorbs like salt water, that the water just absorbs everything, that the wind blows everything away, that the self-extinguishing dissolves with sentient beings. The self-extinguishing dissolves with sentient beings. In other words, we think that we're self-existent. But what we need to come to recognize is that we're no self, that there is no self. It's an illusion. So we go through a process of examination, of logic, to get to that. There's not enough time for us to go into that right now. We've talked about it before briefly. The book goes into it in greater detail, Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And there's many practices that we do to help us to develop that vision or that point of view of being able to recognize no self. That what we think we are is actually a no self. So there's practices that help us to do that. So the fire, the water, the wind, these practices help us to develop the awareness that this is all conditional. What we have, what we think is permanent, is just all temporary, based on certain conditions for it to remain to seem permanent. But when those conditions change, now all of a sudden that which seemed permanent totally becomes impermanent and is destroyed in one manner or another. So it's conditions that we begin to recognize. So this is the meditation on the gross impermanence of the outer world. It's all based on conditions. The next part says, meditation on the subtle impermanence of the outer world. The meditation on the subtle impermanence. The first one was the gross impermanence. Now we're talking about the subtle impermanence of the outer world. So here we're looking at things like the four seasons. We take the four seasons for granted. There are parts of the world, this world that we live in, there's only 3 seasons. They only know about 3 seasons. 4 seasons? You have 4 seasons? Oh, no. It's not possible. There's only 3 seasons. Or maybe you live in another part of the world and they'll say, 3 seasons, 4 seasons? Oh, no, man, there's only 2 seasons. We only have 2 seasons. That's all there is. And then there's yet other parts of the world that there's no season. It just seems to be, it's always like this. So again, it's very, very subtle. People that are in the midst of this don't realize that it's different for other people in other parts of the world. They simply haven't been educated to that. And we talked about the ignorance before, so this is a way of recognizing, of seeing how this practically is part of our psyche of what we think about. Another one of these that's so subtle is the movement of the sun and the moon. Now, I just said the movement of the sun and the moon. Now, the sun and the moon, the sun basically doesn't move. We move around the sun. And that's only been, 500 years or so they figured that out? For gazillions of years that came before that human beings were alive, they always said, oh, no, the sun's revolving around the earth. But now they realize with Copernicus, oh, no, we're revolving around the sun. And the moon is revolving around the earth. So we begin to see these dynamics of this, but it's very easily to be taken for granted that we're standing still and all these things are moving around us. We're having a total misconception of these things. That the sun rising, the sun setting, is just the movement of the Earth going around, rotating on its axis during the solar day, and the moon, the lunar day, and so on, going around. So many of these old traditions, the Buddhism included, Hinduism, the Jewish tradition, the Hebrew tradition, all their calendars are based on a lunar calendar. And they're not as regular as the solar calendar that we use. The solar calendar moves slowly, more predictably, and makes more logical sense to us. And so the lunar calendar is much more, seems erratic to us. And maybe that's why, people that follow them, may be called lunatics. Anyway, so we're talking about things that are taken for granted, the subtle impermanence of the outer world of nature. And the next one, the third one, is each moment vanishes into the next moment. That there is this procession of what we call time. Things are in the past, things are in the present, things are in the future. And with this point of view, with our vision, with the way we look at things, with our viewpoint, that seems very true and very rational. And we can have conversations with ourselves and other people about this progression of time and so on. But when we reach a certain other perspective, this perspective of the spiritual, we see that all that time just evaporates, just goes away. We see it as just a function of the human mind, the intellectual mind, to create this system by which we can judge events and so on like that. We create days, we create months, we create weeks, we create years, and all this kind of stuff, all these inventions of time, when actually it's all just the click of a finger. So this takes a lot of effort, or not, I shouldn't say a lot of effort, but it takes a lot of patience to be able to comprehend, to recognize, and to stabilize into our minds. So those are the meditations on the subtle impermanence, the four seasons, the turning of the days, the time. So now we turn to the other impermanence. We said there were two impermanences. There's the outer impermanence of the world, and then there's the inner impermanence of sentient beings. We see our impermanence, and we do that through others and through ourselves. So examples of this are we investigate the impermanence with oneself with the prospect of death, that we will die. We meditate on the characteristics of death. What's it going to be like? Am I going to die young? Am I going to die old? Am I going to die fast? Am I going to die slow? All these different things come up. This realizing my impermanence, that everything's going to change. And my body is going to go away. And when my body goes away, and I'm learning that there is a spiritual aspect to who I am, that gets released. Well, how does that happen? And where does it go? And all that kind of stuff comes up. So all this is all based around the impermanence of the self. Then there's the meditation on the exhaustion of time, when we see that all this time just stands still, that we, when we say that, as we get older, and we find that sometimes I think I'm still 15 years old. Sometimes I can remember when I was 3 years old or 5 years old, and it seems like it's as fresh to me as it was when it happened. And I'm sure you have those experiences and so on. And maybe you can project what tomorrow is going to be like, or what next week, or what it's going to be like in 4 or 5 years from now. Maybe you have that projection to be able to do that. So this is meditating on the exhaustion of that whole process, that we can think that thing through to the point of, driving ourselves very crazy. So we say, oh, I can't worry about all that. I can't worry about what happened in the past. I can't worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. And I can barely handle what's happening right now. So we're exhausting the futility of that kind of investigation. So then we also, to investigate the impermanence with oneself, we meditate on separation. Separation. So this may be, oh, I'm going away. Oh, I got to leave my family, or my family's going away and I'm staying home. So I'm going to be separated. I'm losing my job. New people are coming in, and now I'm fearful of the prospect that they're going to replace me in my job. And so there's going to be a separation of my livelihood. So all these different examples of separation come into this and creates all kinds of thoughts and anxiety in ourselves. But if we can contemplate that, if we can recognize that, if we can see that and realize this is all the nature of impermanence, and it's natural. This impermanence is natural. It's part of the phenomenal nature. The phenomenal nature. And there's a reality to this phenomenal nature. It's temporary, but in this temporariness, in this temporary nature, from our point of view, it's very real. However, we have to allow it to be able to rest and to be able to recognize that there is this notion that all this is concepts of the intellectual mind, of the human mind, that has developed all this sense of all this phenomenal nature, of what is permanent and what is impermanent. In the absolute reality, in the absolute truth, in the absolute nature, it's inexpressible. There's no way to explain it. I can't say everything is one. That's just a concept. I can't say everything is nothing. That's a concept. It's something that is beyond our human capability to be able to fully comprehend and to articulate. So we just abide in it. And this is where the peace lies. This is where we can find that and not be analytical about how we got to the peace, not to be even thinking about the peace, because the peace itself is another mental construct that we've created for ourselves. So all this has to do with the letting go. When we talk about letting go, that we're preparing ourselves for letting go. We're letting go of that which we know to be impermanent, or we're coming to recognize the impermanence, but we're also letting go our notions of what we think permanence is. So in order to examine this impermanence, we said that there was, within sentient beings, there was the other and there's the self. Then we can also look at others, look at ourselves and others in relation to each other when we observe someone else's death, and how that triggers thoughts in our own mind, in our own life, that we hear of someone's death and we ponder that. And maybe we've seen someone die and it's been years, but now we hear of somebody else dying and it catapults us right back to where we were at that moment when we saw that other person die, and so on. So all this is showing us this timelessness of all this, the location of all this. And the recollecting, all this, the recollecting in the mind. And there's a recollecting, there's a spirituality to this as well. Because when we have a spiritual event, when we have a spiritual awareness, when we have a spiritual realization, there's a sense of remembering. There's a sense of purpose. There's a sense of the aha. Oh, I've been here before. This deja vu, whatever you want to call it. This all makes sense to me. I remember this, but I can't tell you what it is. But there's a certain familiarity to all of this. So by going through this over and over again, we begin to stabilize that, but still maybe not having the, to be able to put our finger, so to speak, on exactly what it was. Say, oh, I had this feeling, that I was an American Indian 300 years ago, but I can't say that I was Chief Runamuck, 300 years ago, and that was my life as an Indian running around in the Maryland countryside or something like that. Maybe there are those who can say that, who have those kinds of experiences, and they're still vivid within them, and they talk about beings that have those, and it hasn't happened to me in that way. But I can certainly have the transpersonal experience of imagining, at the very least, what it is to have been Chief Runamuck 300 years ago running around the countryside. And maybe you can do that too. So this is how we apply others' impermanence for ourselves. Through their death, through someone else dying, hearing about it, something affects us. Through somebody else's recollection of the mind, that it triggers something within our mind to say, oh yeah, I have an experience like that too. Many times in our discussions, we'll have a discussion, somebody will make a comment, and then everybody else will want to make an anecdote about their experience similar to what that was. And it's all good. It's all true. None of it is false. It's part of your experience basis. It's part of your database. And that's okay. But that's showing the transpersonal. That's an illustration of the transpersonal. Through all this, we're talking about this spirituality. I just want to take a short little sidestep here. And yesterday we were talking about, the names of all these enlightened ones, these deities and so on. And those names can get in the way. There's no question about that. And I'm going to talk about that this next Sunday, because I realized, maybe we'll talk about it next week. But the point I want to make now is that the spirituality, the way we use the spirituality, is to explain something that is very natural to us within being human beings and so on. And it's through this spiritual lens, these traditional lenses that we create for ourselves to be able to see and explain these things. But there is this humanism is another way of looking at things. And a lot of people, take pride in their humanism, and they all different walks of life and so on like that. And there's traditions that can follow that humanism. The humanism can be almost like a religion itself. One example of that is like the Tao Te Ching. The way of virtue. It was written by Lao Tzu in China about the same time as the time the Buddha lived. And so the Tao Te Ching, humanism is like empirical spirituality. It's taking out all the references and leaving, what's behind, the emotions, the exaltations, the awe, the terror, all those things are there for us to explain in simple terms of being a human being. And some people may be adept at that and so on, and being able to do that. But the spirituality brings in this um, this atmosphere of something that we are part of, this vibration or something. And maybe that becomes an attachment. That's the attachment to peace, you know. But we need to be able to balance that out. We don't want to let our imaginations run away with us in either one of those two directions. There's a practicality to looking at both sides of this and not letting our imaginations get too carried away. So I'll just bring that up at this juncture. What we're trying to do is to develop a conduct, a behavior, of patterns that is based in mindfulness. That there is a characteristic of mindfulness about this, what we're doing. We're looking at all these possibilities and so on. That there is an understanding of the things that we can understand and the things that we don't understand, and a rationalization of the things that we think we understand or not understand as all being temporary. There's an understanding of that. There's a conduct in that. There's a comprehension, you know, that the way in which this works now I can create models for myself. I can create examples for myself. I can see that, and I can help other people through comprehension, that we can talk about these things in rational terms and so on. And out of that, I develop a conscience, a conscience that we have a conversation with, that it might be the dualistic conversation. It may be the one where we talk about virtue and non-virtue. The conscience. Well, my conscience tells me I can go ahead and do this. Oh, this other part of my conscience says, oh, you better not do that. So we're going through this awareness, this conduct of the conscience. So we may take it a step further, talk about consciousness, but just look at it as the conscience. And then there's the stability of all of this. The stability of all of this, being able to be in this conduct of being a complete human being with all these things happening simultaneously, and we being able to balance that. And you know, the example that we use all the time of this indestructible diamond, you know, is simply a tool, a technique to help us to understand the permanence, or rather the stability, not necessarily the permanence, but the stability of that. Okay, before I continue on, is there any questions or comments?
I have a few questions.
Okay.
Is in the tradition, is are impermanence and change used interchangeably, or is there a distinction made? I would imagine it would mean the same thing in this context.
Yeah, I think so. You know, without going too deep into it, to me it seems the same thing. Impermanence, that the nature of impermanence is change.
Right. So is there anything in our experience that doesn't change? Like, because it seems to me like when I do get quiet, like even I kind of feel this way right now, and I very rarely feel this way, but it does seem like there's all of the contents of what I experience are in flux, but there's like a stillness underneath it, almost like if like the analogy, the mirror analogy, like there does seem to be like something maybe this is a concept I'm laying on top of it, but it seems like there's something that isn't changing. Like the context, or like the stillness that it's happening in, seems like there's something that isn't changing there. In the tradition of your experience, is that the case, or is that something that is a misperception on my end or something like that?
Well, no, and that's exactly, and the way to experience that is through the meditation.
Mhm.
In other words, we can intellectualize what that means or try to intellectualize what that means. But until you have that experience, and even once you have the experience, there's no way to convey it to anybody else. There's no words to be able to explain it. So someone who has had that experience to say, yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Mm.
If I could step in and say something right now,
Sure, go ahead.
there's something in your experience that doesn't seem to change. That's a conceptualization. It's just that you are not aware of the change.
Yeah, that's what I was
You were
thinking.
more, if you were more, if your attention was sharper, you would see that that thing which doesn't seem to change actually is changing.
Yeah.
So anything which doesn't seem to change is a conceptual overlay on the actual experience.
Yeah. Thank you, Bernie. Yeah, because
My opinion. Somebody wants to debate that, they're welcome to, but that's
that gets,
what I
yeah,
think.
definitely gets to the heart of what I was wondering, or my question of, I don't know.
But
Well,
as far as, if we're talking about Buddha nature, that gets quite a bit more complicated. I think at the start, it's just simpler to think that everything in your experience is changing.
Yeah.
and for me, just to give a little personal anecdote, that was the hook that allowed me, that gave me permission to really connect with the Buddhism. Because in the Buddhism, they talk about the future Buddha. And the future Buddha to me connotes the evolution, the change.
May I add something?
Sure.
Actually, related to this question, I would just happen to read somebody shared a page out of Dharma book speaking about primordial awareness, unborn primordial awareness. So because and that's what it says, that because it is not ever born, it is not gonna die. So that means it's not gonna change. It's not gonna come and go. So that's kind of like essence of, maybe the essence of our spirit, or essence of our mind, heart mind. So maybe that could be what you feel as something that is not changing.
I would use the word, if it's unborn, if the essence from which it derives is unborn and the essence of where it goes is deathless, then what we experience is simply a display of that. It's not born, it's just an impermanent display. It's like the rainbow. And we interpret the appearances of that to be all these things, this phenomenal nature is simply the display of that unborn nature. But it's
Yeah. What I'll just say what I was told once in this, if it's something that you see, it's your experience, and experience is always changing. You may think it's you, but it's really just part of your experience. Anything which is the base consciousness is something that you never see in the way that we see other objects. You're never going to see Buddha nature the way you see somebody else in the room. It just is a different kind of seeing entirely. And we can use the word seeing because we don't really have any other word to use, but the experience is just totally different.
And just to put another point on this is that this is what the Mahayana, excuse me, excuse me,
Adriana?
no, the Madhya, the Maha,
Majamaka.
no, excuse me, I'm sorry, the
Mahamudra?
Mahamudra. This is what the Mahamudra is the articulation of. And there's many, many treatises on this, many, many books written about this and so on, and is fascinating. And so if you're interested in what we're talking about here, it's the Mahamudra that is the articulation of this investigation, or the, you know, bringing all these thoughts together and kind of, I don't know if you make a conclusion out of this or what. Huh?
Another really quick question. With the four thoughts, I know you've said this before, but where it says, with the suffering of samsara, I will avoid the root cause of my samsaric existence.
Yes.
When they say the root cause, are they talking about like desire, like in the Four Noble Truths, or craving, or is that like self-grasping, or?
It's all of that. It's any of that and all of that.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter what it is. The point is that we're here now, and now we have to deal with it through the excellent practice of peace to enlightenment. It doesn't matter as much as why we're here, it's what we're going to do now that we're here.
Okay. And just while I'm on a roll here, with the in the prayer, I think the Korma prayer, when it says the innate root of virtue, unless this is like a bigger question, but like just if it's like a really short thing, what does the innate root of virtue mean? Like the innate root part?
Well, I think, and Bernie might say something about this, but this is the designation. The innate virtue is a designation that we give to the body of truth, the truth body of the Dharmakaya. When we talk about that, that which has not been born, the truth body, the virtue body. So it's a designation.
I see. Thanks. Cool. Thank you. And thank you, Bernie, as well.
I do the best I can, but don't take everything I say as the truth without thinking about it for yourself. So.
Yes, and the same goes for me. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, is trying to excite you, to awaken you, or give you the awakening to, develop this all by yourself, to cultivate this investigation for yourself. That's the only way it's accomplished.
Yeah, everyone always wants to talk about ultimate truth and what its nature is, and I'm no exception, but really it's something you have to experience for yourself, and nobody can tell it to you until you see it for yourself. So.
Okay. Does anybody else have another comment? I got something else to speak about here, but go ahead, Alex, please.
No, I just have a question that like you were following these examples of what is impermanent. Like, for example, we don't want to be attached to peace because, peace is impermanent, and like it may actually lead to more suffering if we too kind of embed ourselves in peace. And but the question is, like, is that following certain teachings, certain the commentary on the text, or these are just examples you came up with, like, based on your own experience?
Well, no, this is all taken from the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, there are going to be many, 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 attributations, if that's the right word, to the great masters who taught on these things. So I would refer you to the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. But no, these are not my own conjectures. I'll tell you my own experiences as my own experiences, but these teachings are coming from Gampopa's bringing together all the teachings into the Jewel Ornament of Liberation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I want to.
Yeah.
certainly it inspires to explore more.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, the question I'd always ask is, what do you got better to do?
Yeah, too
All
many
right.
things.
All right. So I would like to wrap this up a little bit now with the beneficial 5 effects of the meditation on impermanence. So in other words, if we take the time, if we develop the system by which we are going to study this and we're going to contemplate this and we're going to allow ourselves to have a transcendent meditative experience with this, what are the beneficial effects that we may be able to experience from this? So number 1, it says that it leads one to release the attachment to this life. We're always talking about letting it go. You got to let this life go. We're all rehearsing for our ultimate death, our passing from a physical body, intellectual body, and releasing our spiritual body. So the beneficial effect here, the first one is that we're using this impermanence to be able to say, why are we holding on to this impermanent nature? It's just going to impede us when it comes time for us to die. So another example of this is the 8 concerns, the 8 worldly concerns that we talk about in the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. When we recite the impermanence, we're implying the 8 worldly concerns: gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, and fame and disgrace. How much time do we spend thinking about those things? And when you look at it, it seems like, oh, never. But then when you really contemplate it, you really think about it, and you begin to examine it, and you begin to write it down, you begin to say, that's all you do think about. So the second beneficial effect is that it nourishes faith in that which is invisible. It nourishes faith in that which we can't easily see. And an example of that is the light spectrum. You know, look at it in terms of physics and light. You know, who would have thought 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago or so, that we would not only be able to look into space and be looking back in time, but we wouldn't be doing it in the visible light spectrum. We'd have to be doing it in the invisible light spectrum. So there are things that we cannot see with our naked eye as human beings that other beings may be able to see, dogs or bees or whatever, but we can see with the aid of technology to be able to see things that are invisible to us. And who would have thought that we'd have the technology to be able to do that? And I suppose you can take that one step further. Maybe this goes to the absurd or something, but will there be technology to be able to measure our spiritual activity? Will there be a meter that there's going to be a needle going up and down with the intensity of your spirituality? You know, biofeedback, you know, is that what some traditions talk about that? Was it Scientology talks about that, I think. So anyway, it's a point of view. It's, you know, so there's this discussion on impermanence nourishes faith in that which we can see, that which we cannot see. It also supports perseverance. That just because we don't see it now doesn't mean that we can't apply new technology, new way of being able to look at things, to have breakthroughs, to be able to experience things that seem to be totally impenetrable to us. And in many of the prayers and practices that we recite, there's a phrase that says something to the effect of Bajra Samaza. Bajra Samaza. It brings you to this whole thing. You go through pages and pages and pages and pages of text, of visualization, of practice and everything. And it goes Bajra Samaza, the indestructible vow that breaks through. The thing that breaks through is not all those words. It's your devotion to penetrating all that. That's what breaks through. You're realizing that which was otherwise unknowable, to have those experiences. And as we've been talking about tonight, to have the experience of change and be able to abide in that experience of change. Vajra Samaza, the indestructible vow that breaks through. Then the fourth of the beneficial effects is to quickly freeze one from the attachment and fear. So our holding on and our fear of letting go, that if we don't hold on, we're going to lose it. And whether it's a possession, whether it's a thought, whether it's a job description, whatever it is, even the mind. You know, when we get to the point of we're about to die, physically die, and we're holding on to our mind. Oh, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die. My body may be gone, but I'm going to hold on to my spirit. I'm going to hold on to that. If I let go of that, I'm no more. And I can't, I don't want to deal with that. So I'm going to hold on to that. The fear of losing your mind. And then the fifth one is that the beneficial effect becomes a cause for the realization of the equal nature of all phenomena. The cause for the realization of the equal nature of all phenomena. This is the samadhi. This is the realization of the true nature of all phenomena. And it's magnificent in its simplicity. Not much else I can say about it. So the samadhi is like the state of mind that we are developing, we are cultivating to be in this peace. It has these different qualities. So the teaching of the samadhi identifies aspects of this, and this is one of the great sutras it's called the King of Sutras, as a matter of fact, one of the great sutras, the King of Sutras, of the teaching of the Buddha.
So, Lance, may I ask you here, you mentioned the nature of phenomena. Could you clarify, is it the nature of phenomena as we perceive them, or kind of the absolute nature of phenomena as their own nature, not as we may perceive them?
Well, it's letting go of both being the perceiver and that which is perceived.
Hmm. So trying to get to the true nature of phenomena as they are.
Well, I always, when it gets down to this question, I always think of the Eightfold Path. And I think of right view, freedom.
Hmm. Okay.
And it always puts a smile on my face. There was a time when it put terror in my heart. All right. So this discussion then has been about impermanence. The four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, that we turn to the Dharma, we turn to the teachings of the Buddha in order that we may be able to understand our impermanent nature. Where else are we going to go? What else can we depend upon? And what does the teaching of the Buddha take us to ultimately? For this is within ourselves, our own experience. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions, please? Okay. Are your minds sufficiently blown?
I just want to say for scientists, it's really easy about impermanence because we know that everything is made of atoms and atoms always moving around and they never stop. And even in vacuum, it's
But
quantum
atoms,
form.
well, how do you define atoms? Do you find atoms as matter, as the building blocks of matter?
Uh, yes, I mean,
Well, then what about the quanta? Is quanta a part of that equation?
well, I mean, the elementary particles are the quanta of energy that is temporarily manifest, and then they come and go. You know, if there is a particle, antiparticle, they annihilate, and nothing. You just
No,
get energy.
isn't that the essence of dualism?
Yes, of course.
It's a
So
state of flux.
yeah, but yeah, things. Even black hole is impermanent because now we know. Hawkins told us there is Hawkins radiation that makes the black hole evaporate
Yeah.
eventually for a very long time.
Well, it gives you something to think about while you're here, right? Just don't get attached to it. All right, brothers and sisters, thank you very much for paying attention, listening to this. And I'm sure some of it has dropped some seeds within your heart mind, and that in due time, things will begin to sprout. Thoughts will come out of this, other thoughts, realizations will come out of this. So you're seeing a system. We're taking it apart, putting it back together again in simple terms, hopefully that we can all agree to, that we all can understand without getting too far afield into the vocabulary of the Sanskrit or the Tibetan or Hindu or Hindi or whatever. Okay, well then we'll do the closing prayers. So we'll start on page 18 and continue through the day Korma prayer tonight. So we'll recite just the English. Dorje Chang, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dormalor Gampopa, Pagmadrupa, and Lord Kumpa. Please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessing of all the Kaju Lamas. By this virtue may I achieve the all-knowing state, and may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide, and I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings. Manjushri is the warrior of wisdom, and Samantabhadra is the devotion of the practice to be able to cultivate that wisdom. By the blessing of the Buddha who attained the three kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikumpa Ratnashri and all the other great masters, because there's many, many great masters, who are omniscient, lords of the Dharma, masters of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you. Thank everybody at home, watching on Zoom, everybody going to be watching on YouTube. Thank you very much. If anybody wants any of the printed materials or anything, you can email us at buddhapracticestudy@gmail.com and request whatever it is, and we'll do everything we can to get it to you.
Lance, thank you for these great lessons.
You're welcome, Mark. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lance. It was a fascinating class tonight. I appreciate everyone else's input as well. It was great. Thank you all.
Thank you, Gavin. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Okay.
Right.
Good night, Matthew. Good night,
Good night.
Zach. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
All right, Mark. Bernie, thank you. Alex, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lance. Happy to join.